What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for MLB Thursday, August 5th.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon.
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top DFS picks for today's MLB slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we have a 6-game slate tonight, so let's take a look at the pitcher position. So I like Framber Valdez, and he's pitching against a low salary batting team, the Minnesota Twins. Framber Valdez, he's giving up a .571 OPS versus lefties, a .676 OPS versus righties, and a .501 OPS versus switch hitters. Now he's facing 3 lefties, 5 righties, and 1 switch hitter, so the splits aren't great, but they're not too bad. And the Twins have hit 12 of his last 49 pitches. That's a .245 batting average. He's $9,700 FanDuel salary, 200 more on DraftKings. He has an ERA of 3.01. Record is 7-2 on the season, pitching an average of 95 pitches per game, projected at 27.1 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can score 30 fantasy points or more in this one. He's averaging 34 fantasy points per game on the season, and he scored 33, 40, and 19 fantasy points in the last 3 games. Now, Vegas does think this is going to be a high-scoring game, 9.5 runs scored in this game, but he is one of the best pitchers on the slate, so I like Framber Valdez here versus the Minnesota Twins. Now, I also like Sonny Gray, but if you want to save some salary on this slate at the pitcher position, take a look at Dallas Keuchel. He's got a 2% pitching advantage over a low salary batting team, the Kansas City Royals. Dallas Keuchel, he's giving up a .635 OPS versus righties, and he's facing 6 righties here tonight. And the reason that I like this pick is because the Royals have only hit 25 of his last 119 pitches. That's a .210 batting average. So he's got a really good pitcher versus batter matchup here, and he's only 7,000 FanDuel salary and 200 more on DraftKings. So you can stack your bats with this pick. Now he's projected at 20.9 fantasy points here tonight. He has an ERA of 4.51. His record is 7-4 on the season, pitching an average of 88 pitches per game, averaging 22 fantasy points per game. He's been struggling a little bit lately, only scoring 13, 15, and 27 fantasy points in the last 3 games, but he does have a good matchup here tonight, so I like Dallas Keuchel here versus the Kansas City Royals. Okay, let's take a look at the catcher first base position. I like Andrew Vaughn with a 50% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Daniel Lynch. Andrew Vaughn is batting 33% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a 1.021 OPS versus lefties, and Daniel Lynch throws 16% worse to righties as he does lefties, giving up a .864 OPS versus righties. Andrew Vaughn is 1 for 1 with a 3 OPS versus Lynch. That 1 hit was a double, and he's only 2,800 FanDuel salary and 100 more on DraftKings. So I like that price on both sites. Projected at 9.5 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 9, 25, and 3 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 9.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Andrew Vaughn here versus Daniel Lynch. Okay, let's take a look at the second base position. Here's another value play for you. I like Aldmis Diaz with a 46% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Griffin Jax. Aldmis Diaz, he's batting 13% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .825 OPS versus righties. And Griffin Jax, he throws his worst ball by far to righty batters. 33% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.025 OPS versus righties. Now there's no at-bats versus Jax yet, but Aldmis Diaz is 2,800 FanDuel salary and 100 less on DraftKings. So I like that price on both sites, projected at 9.8 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 6, 3, and 3 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 9.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Aldmis Diaz here versus Griffin Jax. Okay, let's take a look at the third base position. I like Yoan Moncada with a 19% batting advantage over a low-salary pitcher, Daniel Lynch. Yoan Moncada, he's batting a .707 OPS versus lefties, and Daniel Lynch throws his worst ball versus switch hitters, 24% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.040 OPS versus switch hitters. Yoan Moncada is 1-for-1 with a 3 OPS versus Lynch. That one hit was a double. He's 2,900 FanDuel salary, 1,900 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.6 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 0, 6, and 0 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 9.5 runs scored in this game. A lot of over-unders at 9.5 here tonight. But I like Yoan Moncada here versus Daniel Lynch.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, let's take a look at the shortstop position. I like Tim Anderson with a 51% batting advantage over that low-salary pitcher, Daniel Lynch. Tim Anderson is batting 35% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a 1.128 OPS versus lefties, and Daniel Lynch is giving up a .864 OPS versus righties. Tim Anderson is 2-for-2 with a 2 OPS versus Lynch. He's 3,600 FanDuel salary, and he's 2,200 more on DraftKings. Projected at 11.1 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 35, and 0 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Tim Anderson here versus Daniel Lynch. I also like Carlos Correa with a 29% batting advantage over the low salary pitcher Griffin Jax. Carlos Correa is batting a .762 OPS versus righties, and Griffin Jax, he throws his worst ball versus righty batters, giving up a 1.025 OPS versus righties. There's no at-bats versus Jax yet, and Carlos Correa is 3,400 FanDuel salary. He's 800 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.7 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 22, 6, and 3 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Carlos Correa here versus Griffin Jax. Okay, moving on to the outfield position. I got a stud pick for you. I like Jesse Winker with a 51% batting advantage over Will Crowe. Jesse Winker is batting 30% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .992 OPS versus righties, and Will Crowe throws his worst ball versus lefty batters, 21% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.287 OPS versus lefties. There's no at-bats versus Crowe yet, and Jesse Winker, he's 4,400 FanDuel salary. He's 1,000 more on DraftKings, projected at 11.1 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 6, 16, and 15 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Jesse Winker here versus Will Crowe. I also like Franmil Reyes with a 33% batting advantage over Ross Stripling. Franmil Reyes is batting 14% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .883 OPS versus righties. And Ross Stripling, he throws his worst ball versus righty batters, 18% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .930 OPS versus righties. Franmil Reyes is 2 for 5, batting .400 with a .8 OPS versus Stripling. He's 3,600 FanDuel salary, and he's 1,100 more on DraftKings. Projected at 10.4 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 12, 9, and 6 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 9.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Franmil Reyes here versus Ross Stripling. I also like Michael Brantley batting against Griffin Jax. Michael Brantley is batting 31% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .947 OPS versus righties, and Griffin Jax is giving up a .685 OPS versus lefties. There's no at-bats versus Jax yet, and Michael Brantley is 3,300 FanDuel salary, and he's 200 less on DraftKings. So I like that price on both sites, but especially like that price on DraftKings, and he's projected at 11.1 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 22, 10, and 6 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Michael Brantley here versus Griffin Jax. Okay, a couple of value plays for you. I like Chas McCormick with a 46% batting advantage over that low salary pitcher, Griffin Jax. Chas McCormick is batting 13% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .790 OPS versus righties. Then we know Griffin Jax pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 33% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.025 OPS versus righties. So I like this righty stack versus Griffin Jax. Now there's no at-bats versus Jax yet, and Chas McCormick is only 2,200 FanDuel salary and only 300 more on DraftKings. Projected at 9.3 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 0, 0, and 6 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Chas McCormick here versus Griffin Jax. And another value play for you, I like Guillermo Heredia with a 30% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Wade LeBlanc. Guillermo Heredia, he's batting 9% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .728 OPS versus lefties. And Wade LeBlanc, he's pitching 21% worse to righties as he does lefties, giving up a .897 OPS versus righties. Guillermo Heredia, he's batting 3 for 6, batting .500 with a 1.667 OPS versus LeBlanc. He's $2,100 FanDuel salary, $200 more on DraftKings, projected at 11.1 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 7 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 16, 0, and 6 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Guillermo Heredia. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that name wrong, guys. Hit me up in the comments with all the names that I couldn't get in this video. There was a lot of them. So I like Guillermo Heredia here versus Wade LeBlanc.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again and good luck.